Hey, welcome to the second episode of Green the Desert. Today we have a very special guest, Allan Savory, who took his very precious time to be with us today. Allan has restored millions of hectares of land, of desertifying land, and he hasn't planted a single tree, I think, or maybe some trees, but not really. He uses a very special technique, and it involves cows. And I might hear you thinking, well, cows, aren't they part of the problem? Well, Allan Savory says that cows are part of the solution. So, hi Allan, welcome to the show. Can you tell me, how can cows be a part of the solution?
Can I correct you on that one? They're not part of the solution. They are the solution.
Wow. Even more.
And now that's a very strong statement to make. But when I discovered that in the 1960s and realized how wrong I had been, and all of us scientists have been, and people throughout history in condemning sheep for causing the deserts that sands that overran the early cities and the biblical world and so on, we'd all been wrong. And is simply not possible to solve the problem without sheep, camels, goats, cattle, horses, etc., livestock.
And can you elaborate a little bit more on that? And so it's not just cows, it's all animals, or it's animals with specific traits?
It's all large herbivores, but being practical over most of the world and having to feed people, the animals we can control easiest are the livestock. And vast regions of the world, nearly all the wildlife of significance has been wiped out. So we have to be practical about it and use the livestock. Now, why it is essential is because we're looking at the loss of biodiversity, desertification, fueling climate change, and these three are feeding on each other now. And the seriousness I need people to understand, because if we stop all use of fossil fuels tomorrow, if somehow we're able to do it, climate change would continue because of agriculture and desertification. The desertification we're talking of covers about 2/3, roughly, of the world's land. Okay, so that's the seriousness. This problem we've attempted to solve for thousands of years using two tools. We're a tool-using animal. Nobody listening to us can even drink milk without using technology, unless they go to the nearest cow and suck with their mouth. You've got to use a cup, a mug, a pipe, a pail, something. We cannot do anything without picking up a tool. With all the money in the world, with all the creativity in the world, with all the labor in the world, you cannot even drink milk without technology. Right? So we've got to use a tool. And for millions of years, we only had two tools. Technology, Stone Age technology, and then we got to the fire. We learned how to make fire. And then we could go into the Bronze, the Copper, the Iron Age, and use the technology that you and I are using today to communicate, which was made possible by fire. Now, when you look at this biological problem of biodiversity loss, desertification, no scientist has shown me where I'm wrong in now over 60 years. It is not possible to solve it with fire, which is a major cause of the problem, and no technology, even imaginable in science fiction, can solve a biological problem of this magnitude.
Yeah, and can you quickly explain, Allan, because I'm sure people are wondering right now, well, very good and well, but how does this exactly go? I can imagine a cow, a lot of people can imagine a cow or another big grazing animal. How can they be the power of regeneration? Can you explain that?
Let me try and make that simple. The first point I need to make is that these vast areas of the world that are man-made deserts and expanding, the main reason is because the rainfall is erratic. The rainfall where you are in Belgium, the rainfall in London is about the same rainfall as Joburg, but they're totally different environments, right? Now, when you get to these environments of Mongolia, Australia, South America, not where you are, not the UK, much of America, we have 8, 9, 10 months of no rain at all. And so in these areas with a high or low rainfall, where it's highly erratic, the bulk of the soil cover that is essential for soil life and all life comes from the dead litter and grass plants, not from trees. It comes from trees in higher rainfall, not in these areas, some of which are only 200 millimeters of rain in a year or so. Right now, grasses, when they grow, cannot shed their own leaves like trees do. And so when they grow, if they are not raised as they were for billions of years before humans, if they are not grazed, they cannot remove their own leaves, and the leaves begin to oxidize. Instead of breaking down biologically in the moist gut of animals, where the moisture is still in the gut of the animal.
So is that so that the seed of the leaves, the carbon oxidized and marriages the two O's?
Well, never forget the carbon. That's a side issue.
Okay.
The leaves growing can't remove themselves. Trees drop their own leaves, or they're evergreen. All right, grasses can't drop their own leaves, and they're not evergreen in these environments. Now, the standing leaves in sunlight, if they don't break down rapidly biologically in the gut of animals, they stand in sunlight and they turn gray, black, and they oxidize. That is slow burning. Fire is rapid oxidation. And they oxidize, and it filters the light reaching their growth points, which are down at ground level, out of harm's way of grazing animals. And it kills the plants. And then we blame overgrazing. And it took us 10,000 years to solve that problem. It was difficult. But finally, in the 1960s, we realized, oh, God, it can only be done by animals, because it's billions of hectares every year. Trillions of tons of vegetation has to be biologically cycled. And the scientific answer to it, and the people's answer to it for the last 10,000 years, has been burn it. But that's rapid oxidation. It burns up the litter that we need for soil cover, and it exposes the soil, and it leads to desertification. Now, great universities like Texas A&M, who consider themselves experts in this, they develop giant machines to try to imitate animals, and with no science behind it, but proof by authority, because professors said it would work. Governments around the world spent millions of dollars on these Dixon imprinter and other giant machines to mimic an animal. Those machines lie rusting today. Billions of dollars were wasted. It failed because machines can't imitate the digestive gut of an animal.
They're making a machine that actually replicates what an animal would naturally do.
That's what they tried to do. All it replicated was the physical impact of trampling. It could replicate grazing, digesting, and dunging and urinate. So we don't need to replicate the animal, we just need to use animals. Now, when academics recommended mimicking animals with machines, as I said, the world accepted it. When an independent scientist said, let's not mimic animals and machines, let's learn how to use animals, then I became a scientific pariah.
Yeah. And is that the system, Allan, that, for example, the desert in New Mexico, I've been there, and I've seen these places where they like put a perimeter around it so no animal can get in, because they say we want to do natural rewilding. And then on one of the courses I followed of your school, I actually saw that by reintroducing animals, then you can make it green again. So the idea of rewilding without animals basically isn't really possible. Is that what you're explaining?
Well, rewilding is a wonderful idea if you're in the UK or the humid parts of the world, because humans have only got three tools to use in conventional thinking: fire, technology, chemicals, machines, you name it, all right, or the idea of rewilding or resting the land. Now, if you live in the UK, if you ignore the economics and how you feed people, just look at the environmental side of it, rewilding is the most powerful thing humans can do to restore biodiversity. It doesn't reverse desertification because the UK isn't desertifying. It's too humid. You can't expose. There's no way anybody in the UK or around Belgium can expose 90% of the soil between the plants and make it bare year after year on millions of hectares. You can't do it with chemistry, you can't do it with chemicals, pollution, anything. Nature covers it, fills the vacuum. Now, if you get to the what I call the brittle environments of the world, where the humidity is highly erratic, it's the worst thing we can do. Now, when I say that, I'm making a dogmatic statement. I make it because the research plots show that. The American government put in research plots to show if you took all animals off the land would recover. They did that because they needed the proof to shoot thousands of Navajo sheep that they thought were causing the desertification. They put in the plots, have stopped the overgrazing of plants. The plots looked wonderful. They had their proof. They went ahead and shot the sheep. The desertification continued, and thank God they left the research plots. So with officials from all the main government agencies in America, in the early days, we went and inspected those plots. Every single plot turned to desert.
Wow. So in the beginning, there was too much overgrazing. They removed the animals. Then it went back, but then it declined very rapidly.
We've got two things going on. We've always talked, and there are thousands of PhD dissertations about overgrazing land, overgrazing rangelands. Overgrazing is the cause of the problem. You cannot overgraze land. We discovered that in the 60s. You can only overgraze plants. Yeah. Right, so two things are going on. Plants are being grazed, or they're being overgrazed, which means too frequently bitten and killed, or they are being not grazed at all and they're killing themselves. So those are going on. But at the same time, if the plant is standing and it's dead, there's no way for the plant to provide the litter that we need. That's why academics develop machines to try to trample the plants down to cover the soil. But a cow's hooves do that, a buffalo's hooves do that, and elephant's feet do that. Right, we can do that with an animal. So two things are going on. One is the grazing of the plants, while to the land altogether, the plants, the soil surface, the crusts on the soil, everything, we have to use hooves of the animal and the dung and the urine to return the plant material to cover the soil. A gardener understands this. Any gardener understands this. But if you have a PhD in land science, it seems impossible to understand.
Yeah. Yeah, because in science, they sometimes tend to look at small parts of things and not at the whole, not at the entire ecosystem, and not at
well, that's
decades.
Essential. That is essential. That we mustn't criticize that. Scientific research, yes, you need to do that. But we're talking management here. And the problem is that we're confusing a management problem with science. Desertification is not a scientific problem. It's not needing further scientific research. That's what all institutions and academics keep calling for. No, it's a 100% management problem. And we already have the knowledge we need to reverse it. We've had that for over 50 years.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say, Allan, you get a piece of land, let's say in the Arabian Peninsula. There's 100 millimeter of rain. You get 10,000 square kilometers, for example. what I heard from you is you wouldn't plant a single tree. You would introduce animals. How is this going to work? Are you just going to drop them there? Are you going to have a special management system with them? Can you explain a little bit on what the step-by-step plan is?
Let me try. That's what we do. You see, we say, okay, we've got a bit of land. Now, immediately, and you're doing what everybody does, you went to a tool. Should we plant trees? In other words, use technology to plant a tree? Or should we introduce animals? And I would say no, because you don't know what you're trying to do yet. Every human action is taken, and every decision, basically a conscious decision, is made generally to meet a need, a desire, to solve a problem. Now, that is reductionist, and it's a management problem. So the land, you've just said you've got a block of land in UAE or wherever. Land is not manageable. We've been trying to manage land for thousands of years, and we've destroyed 20 civilizations. Now it's a global problem. Now, land is not manageable because it is so tied to the culture of the people inhabiting that land and to the economy. You absolutely cannot divorce the economy, the land, and the culture of the people. So when you say, here's a block of land, Alan, how would you manage it? Well, I would have to say, well, who's living there? Who's got this? What are we dealing with? I need to know what people are involved. What is their culture? What are their requirements? And what is the economy we're operating in? Because we've got to take that land and those people who are concerned and ask them how they want their lives to be based on their culture, because that's going to be supported by the land. They can't manage the land, they can only manage their lives. And then if they don't stay and can't support their families or be stable economically, you're going to start getting males committing suicide because they can't support their families, etc. So you have to have that human component and know what those particular people want, not somebody in Brussels or London wants, or in the World Wildlife Fund wants. That's irrelevant. It's what the people on the land want. So once we know that, and what they can earn income from, what can support them, how they can generate from the land, then we look at that land, and then we look at all possibilities. There's nothing wrong with planting trees, unless it's economically unsound, environmentally unsound, and not in line with what people need and want. So we would look at that bit of land, and if it's in UAE, which I've been to three or four trees, I think, they've planted over $30 billion they've spent desalinating water and planting trees. And I took lots of photos of it. They flew me over it in helicopters. It's all total failure. $30 billion, because there's a low rainfall area where the trees cannot provide the soil cover, and the sand is just blowing through it. And you cannot just keep desalinating water, because that's water that you desalinate is taking an awful lot of energy. And where do you put the salt? You're removing salt, and that salt is going to get back into those seas and increase the salination. You can't use technology to solve these biological problems. And yet, if we went to that same situation you're talking about, and could just talk to the local people, explain how to make their decisions in their own self-interest, in their culture, on their land, I guarantee you they would solve that problem within a day or two. Yeah. Because it's a management problem.
Let's say you have you got that 1,000 square kilometer of land. You talk with the locals. They say, well, we want to grow, let's say, dates. We want to let our animals graze, goats, for example, or camels or other animals. You have developed a holistic management planning techniques.
Yeah,
Can you explain me how that will work?
Well, it's a management process. So take your example. Let's say you said you have 1,000 hectares. You're describing a very low rainfall. You said 200 millimeters. All right. The first thing we would do if we were dealing with those Bedouins or whoever is to say, don't confuse ownership with management. Nature doesn't know such a thing as ownership. and you're going to have to manage your families, your culture, your economy, and you're going to, from nature, you're going to have to produce food. Dates, goats, hides, whatever. You're going to have to. All right, so don't confuse ownership. And we would get them right away to see that 1,000 hectares of land is never going to support anybody for a prolonged time. And if you developed it highly, like an oasis, like the Israelis are very skilled at doing, greening the desert. If you developed it as a little green spot in the desert, it would be a green spot in an ever-expanding desert and ultimately going to fail. So we would get them to understand not to confuse ownership with management. Who owns the land around you? You better start working together, because we're going to have to solve this problem on a greater scale. And that's a terribly important point. I live on half the year in land in Africa. Now, I donated that land, and it was worth a lot of money at the time I donated it, and made the chiefs trustees with me and my wife, and we live on that land, and it's producing amazing results and training people from all over. And when I donated the land, people said, how the hell can you do that? Think of your family. How can you give that away? And I said, because I don't value ownership.
Mm-hmm.
I value the work I'm doing. I value living with the people. I value wildlife. That's what I value. And if I try and retain ownership here, we will lose the land. I was looking at the political realities. And so I donated the land. Now people, 20, 30 years later, say, how on earth were you so wise that you're still sitting on the land when thousands of farms were destroyed? And I wasn't wise. I just managed holistically, looking at the whole picture, and not in the way they do. So, yes, that's a major part of our work. There's two parts to our work. The main one is to address the cause of global biodiversity loss, desertification, fueling climate change, which will continue even after fossil fuels. Right? Now, the cause of that is a management cause, and a scientific problem, and so how to address that. And that I talked about in a 12-minute talk at COP26. Then you say it's a management problem, and if you're trying to help world leaders to address that, the immediate thought everybody listening to us will have, well, how can you do that? Humans are managing millions of things every day, so how could any world leader address that problem? Well, the answer is that's another of our fallacies. We're not managing millions of things every day. You're only managing 3 things. We are producing millions of things every day. We're producing smartphones, bombs, music, art, literature, buildings, roads, bridges, milk, wine, cheese, hides, fish from the ocean, food from the ocean. We produce millions of things. They're not complex. They're not self-renewing. They stop if you stop producing them. You can produce wine or bombs, food, or you can produce jails or schools, and economies often don't distinguish.
Yep.
That's not where the problem lies. So then you ask yourself, well, what do we manage? And the only things humans have ever managed is our lives and our organizations or institutions to manage at scale. And the first thing they have to do, you and me included, is to finance themselves. If you go broke, you can support your family. So the first thing you're doing is working within that economy to finance your family or your organization, and then when you manage nature to produce everything. Everything we produce comes from nature, goes back to nature. So there's 3 things we manage, and as I said earlier, you cannot choose to manage one or the other. They're indivisible. And that's what we as an organization, the Savory Institute, along with hundreds of other people and fellow scientists acting independent of their institutions, that's what we were able to develop in the early 90s when we discovered what was causing it. So when you try to address, say, desertification, as China's doing by planting trillions of trees, or this great green wall they want to plant of trees across Africa, you knew it's going to fail. Why? Because the lack of trees wasn't the cause of the problem. And you're using technology to plant trees to try to solve a biological problem. So I don't have to be wise or anything to guarantee its failure. Just like the UAE, $30 billion planting trees failed. So that's just logic, and science is logical. If you don't address the cause of a problem, I don't think you're ever going to solve it. And so we've got global conferences going on. We've got more than 100 in Europe alone. I was there the other day in Hungary. We're talking about this. There's more than 100 regenerative agricultural organizations. They're wonderful people. Their motive is totally right. Their practices and the way they practice and what they suggest producing, I can't fault it. But not one of them is addressing the cause of the problem. So we're just going to repeat history, because if you look at all those ways of producing food and fiber that are being advocated either by mainstream agriculture or the regenerative agriculture movement, tell me what is new and wasn't being done thousands of years ago. Nothing that I can find.
Yeah. But that's a very difficult thing to do, eh? If you're a scientist or a policymaker, it's just easy. Well, you have this 1,000 hectares or 1,000 square kilometers of land. What are we gonna do with it? Just A, B, C, D. That's it. Just gonna throw millions of dollars into it. That's it. But what you are talking about is really taking a step back, going much deeper. Trying to grow, I would say, use the word grassroots movement almost, that goes via the communities of people that live there. Look about how they can manage their lives, what their lives' dreams are, and that's a lot of work and something that we as Westerners we're not used to do.
Well, it's the reason you think it's a lot of work is because we're just discussing this now and you've been lightly exposed to it. It's actually less work. It's far easier than anything we've ever done before. What we've always done, let's talk at scale, all right? Because what the individual farmers do, they're operating within the global finance that is driving environmental destruction. So individual farmers, people, poultries, can only do the best they can to manage their lives within the economy they operate within, and then produce food and fiber, etc. from nature. Now, when you get to scale, that's where we have to solve this problem. Now, the moment you do go to scale, you're managing a human organization. I said there are only three things you manage: humans and our organizations, economy, and nature. Now, the problem is that at scale, this is where it really goes wrong, because the organizations that develop the policies, it's not that their motive is wrong, it's not that people are being evil and all these things we are blaming. They're part of it, but they're symptoms largely, as I see them. When you look at that scale, the reason things are going wrong is the way that governments develop policy, the way that they do it. That's why I suggested over 2 years ago, let's try a different way of doing it and just have everybody observe. I wouldn't suggest that without already knowing how it works. And I know how it works because I've done it in India, I've done it in Lesotho, I've done it in Zimbabwe, I've done it in the United States with groups of officials, etc. And every time we find it's far easier. It's harmony, you stop all the arguments and differences, and people come back to the land and begin to solve the problem at scale. So the only way we're going to do that is to actually do it and have people observe how much easier it is. Now, I need to explain that's why it's difficult to do it the way we do at the moment. Picture it that you are the Prime Minister or the President of a country. How do you develop policy? It's exactly the same way whether you're a dictator or the leader of a a party in power in a democracy. Policies develop the same way. You will get around you representatives around the problem you want to address. So you'll address, let's say, agriculture. You'll get experts. You'll get them from your officials. You'll get them from corporations. You'll get them from lobbyist groups, etc. Now, they will act as advisors to you. You will have your own political concepts and your intent. Every political party, its prime responsibility is to finance itself and stay in power. The secondary concern, governing well. That's part of the problem. Now, it's the same with every church. It's the same with every religion. It's the same with every environmental organization. It's the same with every farmers' organization. So when you get these people together to advise you, you're bringing people together from institutions. Now, the moment we form an institution, an organizational institution, it's no longer a human. No organization behaves like a human being. They will when we hang the first company for poisoning people. We never can. We won. Okay. So now, just to show that this is everywhere, if we look at religion, the message of all the religions, I think, was very essential. And I'll just look at one, Christianity, because many people are Christians. And if you look at that, the message of the founder is simple: love and caring. And millions and millions of Christians have been capable of love and caring for centuries. But what happened when we tried to manage religion at scale? You have over 2,000, well over 2,000 Christian organizations. They've been going to war, torturing, maiming each other, fighting other religions, and protecting paedophile priests, not going against their very mission to protect the innocent and the children. That's not behaving like millions of Christians are capable of doing as individuals. So when it's happening, even in our religions, you could take any other. I mean, the first people to support what I'm saying in the world should have been cattlemen's organizations, livestock organizations, and environmental organizations. To this day, over half a century later, not a single environmental organization or cattlemen's organization has supported them. Thousands of individuals have. Institutions. So now what we've got to do is to enable, show world leaders, just with one example, so they can observe how easy it is if you bring people together as citizens, not as institutions, because institutions are incapable of common sense. Institutions are almost incapable of ever admitting error. They circle the wagons and protect the institution and go against their very purpose, including political parties, churches, and environmental organizations. And yet those are the people that are developing policy. Yeah. Institutions are.
And wouldn't this also imply, Allan, that people actually need to take more responsibility for their lives, what you are saying right now? Because right now we can hide behind those institutions and we can say, well, it's the fault of the institution, or it's the fault of this, the fault of that. That what you're actually saying, well, it all is comprised by single citizens. You are a citizen, I'm a citizen. But that means that it has to come from me, and that's a huge responsibility. And it also means that I cannot be a victim in this. I have to be an active participator, and that, I think, is a huge part of the mind shift, don't you think?
It leads to that, but that's not the mind shift you need first. As I understand it, and I've spent decades trying to understand this problem, as I understand it, we've got two ways forward at the moment. The problem of desertification is even more serious than fossil fuels. I'm just going to repeat that. There's no greater problem facing humanity today. We can do all the dreaming about space exploration, but no human, no animal, no plant can live without suitable habitat. You can have all the food in the world, all the water in the world, but if you don't have suitable habitat, you're dead. Right? It's the most vital principle. if I could put it in poetry. Now, humans are rapidly destroying our own habitat.
Exactly.
So there's nothing more important than this. Now, how do we move forward? If we look at, and when new knowledge, truly new knowledge, like we are talking about today, that goes against human beliefs, is involved, the only way we've ever been able to change is by what you're doing, having podcasts like this, talking to more and more people, what all the wonderful people in regenerative agriculture are doing, talking to more and more, convincing more and more people what we're doing in Savory Institute, talking and training and helping more and more people understand, until eventually institutions change. Now, if you look at the historical record of every single discovery that went against human beliefs, that has never been achieved in under 100 to 200 years. I don't think young people have got the time. I don't think they've got the time with the rate at which we're destroying their own habitat, while arguing and discussing carbon and fossil fuel and blah, 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 rearranging the deck chairs while the damn ship is sinking.
Yeah.
So now that's the only way of change we know. That is why, personally, in the few years I've got left, I'll be 89 in a month,
89?
I think it is. Yeah. So I've got very little time left. And in that time left, the greatest service I can do to humans, and I'm already too old to do it, I'll have my need help, is to just have one state, one government, some way, have the leader be a statesman and say, I'm carrying on as we are, I'm not going to take risk, but on the side, I'm just going to work with the Savory Institute to get them to facilitate so the citizens in my country and our institutions can develop policy, let's say in agriculture, in a different way, and let's just see what happens. Now,
You have a holistically managed government.
No, not a holistically managed government, just a government to develop a policy on the side with the citizens and the institutions developing it, but involving citizens, not just institutions that are incapable of common sense. It's a hell of a picture.
Fair enough.
Now, if that is done, let's look at the downside. Say I'm wrong and it's a complete waste of time. Then a country or a state would have wasted maybe $1 million in a year's time. That's not a big deal. If I'm right,
sounds very feasible.
And if I'm right, and different other countries and the press and everybody, media is watching it, and if I'm right, and citizens and institutions and political bodies working together to solve their problem, they will solve it, not me. Right? If that is right, and the chances of it being right, I believe, are over 90%. What is the advantage of that? We will save billions of lives. We will save billions of businesses. There's not a single business in the world that will ever be sustainable until agriculture is.
Yeah.
And
No, I totally
agriculture
agree.
today is the most destructive industry in the world.
Yeah. And agriculture is the basis of everything. We need food as the first thing we need to get started, to get and do anything we want. We talked a lot about the surrounding vision about it, but I would really love to delve a little bit with you, Allan, in the practical stuff. Let's say we've sorted a lot of the management behind the management, like, let's say, out. What is the technical way? Because we talked about cows are the solutions or grazers are the solutions. Like you said, you can overgraze plants, and if you overgraze plants, then the ecology will collapse as well. But how do you make sure that you use animals in a way that they actually help and rebuild the land? Very technical. I'm super curious, and I think the listeners are also curious to get a little bit more on the technical side of it.
All right, I think I've got that. But again, just before I answer that, I just want to say animals are not the solution. They're essential to solving the desertification part of this. But what I'm talking to applies to COVID, to immigration, to defence, to terrorism. It applies to all these things. Immigration, which is changing the face of Europe. It applies to all of these policies. Right, having said that, now let's just look at your questions. I faced that problem in the 1960s when I realized how wrong I had been and all the fellow scientists working with me, and that only livestock as a tool could reverse desertification. Now, how were we to do it? Every way that humans, pastoralists, had ever run livestock for over 10,000 years had led to desertification. So now how do you do it? All right. Now, I was an independent scientist. I didn't have big resources behind me. I was opposed by government, by universities, etc. So not having any resources, I decided not to try and reinvent the wheel. This was a management problem, so I would look outside the scientific field into management. And looking at all the management schools, Harvard, etc., the whole library is full of it. It's all too complicated, too complicated for pastoralists, farmers, etc. One of the things I looked at was the military, because I was involved in a war as an officer in the army. And what I found in the military was that over 1,000 years of military experience in Europe had solved this problem. Nothing to do with science. It was the military that solved it. So all I did was I trimmed the training from Sandhurst that we were getting as officers in the Rhodesian army. And they would never recognize it today, but I credit them with it because that's where the concept came from. And what they had done over thousands of years of learning how to train people to produce the best possible plan at this moment in time in immediate battlefield conditions was essentially to not try to do it. It's too much for the human mind. Yeah. So what the farmer, the pastoralist, with crops and wildlife and family life and everything else, it's too much. Don't try and do it. So you break that problem up into little segments that the human mind, even if very stressed, can deal with easily. And so you break it up into little segments, you do each little segment, and you put them in order so they build on each other. And there is the best plan right now. And I did that, I modified it. As I say, the military wouldn't recognize it today. I just credit them with it.
Interesting.
And that worked immediately. That was in the mid-1960s. And we've never, ever, ever had a single failure. Because it's got 1,000 years of work behind it. What we have had is thousands of people fail to do it, and now hundreds of people developing derivatives, derivations, grazing gurus, grass whisperers, and grazing systems.
So it's actually a very pragmatical way of science. You just look what works and build further on that, basically.
Well, that's just, you have a chart and it just says, what months are you planning? Just the next 6 months, what's the next year? Anybody can answer that question. Now forget it. Just put it on the chart. And the next, well, you've got to have divisions of land to move animals. How many divisions of land have you got? Natural, with rivers, hills, or fenced, or whatever? I've got 10. Oh, man, that's easy. Just put 10 of them down the side. Do you see how easy that was? Now forget it. Next question, just ask you, what size are they? Oh, this one is only hectares, that one's... Just do it. Okay, now forget it. You see, just break it like this, and you just build up on a chart. Where are poisonous plants? Where are predators? Where are crops going to be grown? Where is water going to dry up? When is it going to dry up? All of these things you go through, they're 12 steps like that, and putting it on a chart, and then when you get to step 12, it says, now where are you going to move your animals? And now you plot where you're going to move your animals. You can plan backwards, you can plan forwards, like stepping through a minefield and not stepping on any mines. And I've literally trained school leavers in Africa to do that in 1.5 hours.
Yeah, that's powerful. And then how do the animals then fit into this system? How do you make sure the animals become a source of regeneration and not of degradation?
All right, the first thing is there's no system, okay? This is a planning process. So you don't fit them into a system, you're planning where they're going to move. Now, what we voice that is we plan to get them in the right place for the right reason. What you're trying, you remember you're using the animal as a tool now and with the right behavior. Now, when we use the animal as a tool, we're using two things. The mouth to graze plants and keep them healthy, not overgraze them. That's why they've got to worry about time. And the other thing we're worrying about is the behavior of the animals. And so we've got to consider how and when do their behavior change. And we can change their behavior, crowding them with fencing, which becomes very, very expensive in wire and very damaging to wildlife. So we may have to reject that. Each family, each place is making their own decisions, economically, environmentally, socially sound. And then if they're large areas of land, such as I live on, with elephants and giraffe and sable and buffalo and waterbuck and kudu and bushbuck and impala and leopards and lions and cheetahs and wild dogs, okay, we can't have any fencing. So now how do we do it? Well, we do it by herding. And by just herding behavior, we get the second part of it. We can now prevent them or minimize the overgrazing plants. And now we can, in herding, get the dung and the urine concentrated where we need and change the herding behavior, or the behavior, because, and this, I would never have learned this if I hadn't spent, I was going to say unfortunate, but turned out fortunate, many years of my life tracking people and wildlife, both in the game department and in a war. And I can assure you that if I'm tracking you across the environment like I'm talking of, with mud, grassland and bush, etc., I can guarantee you that if you're calm, collected, in a good state of mind, you will not put your foot on a coarse plant. Now, if I'm tracking you and I see your foot going on a coarse plant, immediately know this man is abused, thirsty, wounded, lost. I know something's wrong. We've got to get that behavior change, because animals are grazing. They're just moving calmly. They're not trampling much litter. That's wonderful in Europe, where you don't need the trampling effect that we do in the more arid, brittle environments. Then we need the herd effect. And that I saw as a young man when we had literally uncountable herds that don't exist today. One friend of mine, a colleague, recorded a herd of ledgeweed 21 miles long without a break in the herd. How many? He couldn't see how deep the herd was. I've seen herds of buffalo that is impossible to count. There were just buffalo everywhere I knew. Whether 5,000, 6,000, I don't know, 10,000, I don't know. You don't see that today.
No, don't.
And those had an impact. So now we've got to use animals as a tool that incidentally produces food.
And when you use the animals as a tool, you say you make sure that they herd together in a group where they trample the soil, they trample the plants, so they're readily to go into the ground. Microbial systems that get boosted, they eat it, they poo it out. So you have this cycle, you have this group moving. Is it a bit comparable with how the buffaloes used to roam in the United States?
Well, we've got to learn how to do it, and I'm working with people continuously in more learning sites. We've got 2 campuses, Savory Institute, where we own the land, and we just call them learning sites because this is new to humanity. We've got to learn how to use the animals as a tool to save human habitat and produce food. But people are still putting the emphasis on the animal and food and not on saving humans. So we're trying to get people to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
And essentially, yes, what you're saying, but it's got to be economically, socially, environmentally sound all the time. When you go out on a piece of desertifying land, bare, hot soil, covered with algae, a hard crust, if you want to know what to do, just join the gardening club in your town.
Yeah.
The old ladies will tell you what to do. And it's no difference. Instead of using a trowel to break the surface, we'll use the animal behavior.
Yeah.
Instead of bringing in manure and spreading it, we just let the animals do it. And we let the urine spread.
And you
I
can
mean, we're just
combine it
using-
with, for example,
using the-
agroforestry, using
So-
trees with it as well. It can be an
Agroforestry is fine. Everything is a possibility.
Yeah.
Everything. We open our minds to all science.
Yeah.
Additional knowledge. You just have to face each situation is totally unique. You and I have the same fingerprints, our fingerprints. No one in the world apparently has your fingerprints or mine.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's the same with every farm, every pastoral community, every place. They're totally unique. They're more unique than your fingerprints. It's simply impossible to duplicate or replicate any farm.
Yeah.
So that farmer has to just be taught how to make decisions more successfully in a management situation.
Yeah.
Farmers are bright, they're observant, they're creative people. We have diminished them and made them subservient to academics. I was horrified when I was in Hungary a short while ago to see what was happening. I looked at agriculture there and I listened to people, and I realized, oh my God, they're ridiculing the agricultural practices because they were stupid. The farmers knew the practices were stupid in the Soviet era because bureaucrats in Moscow were dictating policy, and the farmers could see it was stupid and damaging.
Yeah.
And so there they were talking of the Soviet period, but I was with them now, and we were looking at agricultural practices that were stupid and damaging to the economy, to society, to the environment. And where were these policies coming from? Bureaucrats in Belgium. What's the difference? Communist bureaucrats or democratic bureaucrats? What the hell is the difference?
No.
You can't do it that way. We have to return the power to the farmers.
Yeah, no, totally. Maybe an interesting question. I'm not sure if you had that question before, Alan, but let's say that the holistic context of an entire region, for example, is that everybody is only eat plant-based food, so they don't eat any animal products.
That would never occur. That would never occur.
But let's just as a thinking exercise say that it would be the case. Could you basically do the same thing without then? How would you go ahead and do it? You
wouldn't. That's why I interjected. What you said was, you said a whole region or a whole group or a country, and you said the holistic context, which is what's going to guide their decisions, said that they're going to be vegans. All right, that's not a holistic context. There can never be a decision already made in the context for how you want your life to be tied to your environment. This concept of a holistic context is totally new. It's not in any branch of religion, not in any branch of science, not in any philosophy in the world. It's a concept where we tie people's culture, people themselves tie their culture and deepest values to their life-supporting environment and thus economy and their behavior. Right? And there's some basic guidelines. One guideline is that you absolutely cannot have a prejudice. So you cannot have organic agriculture in it. Why? Because that's a prejudice against chemicals.
Yeah.
There must be no prejudice in the context, the holistic context. And it can be likewise vegan. That is a decision already made. How the hell can a decision already made be in the holistic context of how you want your life to be? What you do when you've determined what you want health, clean food, clean water, healthy, stable economy, stable, whatever it is, freedom to pursue your own spiritual values, whatever is deep. And you've tied that to your environment, not as it is today, but as it'll have to be hundreds of years from now for your descendants to live a life like that. When you've done that and your behavior, now you'll come and look, oh, we want to be vegans.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if that's in line with this. How would that save our environment? How would that provide us with the health and food? And if you believe it, we'll go ahead.
And would you be able to let's say a village contacts you, Alan, and just for exercise sake, and they are already all vegan. That's just their starting situation, and they're really like very certain of this. They don't want to deviate from it. Can you still work with an animal system that you don't kill them and you just use them as a tool for regeneration? Is that technically possible?
Absolutely. With a group, let's say I was working with a group of people, and they were all vegans. I would just say, how do you want your lives to be? Get them to develop a holistic context. They couldn't mention veganism or organic or any how to do it.
Interesting.
Right? And then we would just look at their land and the state it is and start discussing, okay, this land is desertifying. It's in a terrible state. It's going to destroy your families. So how are you going to correct it? What tools? Have you developed any technology that correct it? No. Could fire correct it? No. Could rewilding correct it? No. What have you left with? Okay, so you're going to have to use animals. Okay, here's how we'll use animals as a tool. Now, you can choose whether you want to let them die cruelly in nature. Nature is not humane. That's a human concept. Mm-hmm. Nature is very cruel. Everything dies, and dies from disease, accident, predation, etc. Starvation. And of these, the kindest is predation, the most humane death in nature. And so you can leave them to die like that and not eat them, or you can give them humane deaths and sell them or eat them. It's up to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's nothing we dictate. People have to solve their own lives. So there's no fight with veganism except that they're saying it's a solution. I've put out a blog on this with the help of a vegan friend, and I think a good reaction to it. And I said, if anybody wants to be vegan for spiritual or health reasons that they believe in, that's their right. I would never oppose that. But if they're being vegan for ethical reasons or environmental reasons, they're wrong.
Yeah.
They just need to learn more.
And I also think it's very context specific, because I have a friend, Ian Tolhurst, a farmer in the UK, who's pretty famous because he has one of the first veganic farms. He doesn't use domesticated animals. He uses wild animals, such as earthworms. And there, for example, he has a fantastic thriving ecosystem, but that's the UK. And I think if you're in that context, then it can be maybe better for the environment to have no domestic animals, right?
Absolutely. If that supports him and his family. But you see, this is a global problem. We're all in the ship together. No country can be an island unto itself. So when people like that do what is really good in their country and they preach it as a solution, as tragically many people in UK in particular are doing, tragic. Because we could take the whole of the UK, entire UK, and wipe it off the map, and it wouldn't make any difference. It's only the size of a small island off Africa's coast, Madagascar, that is desertifying.
Yeah.
So people need to get realistic. So when a farm is doing that, that's wonderful, but don't put it forward as a world solution. Yeah. Now you're doing damage because of the influence the UK has in the world. Oxford, Cambridge universities, and I find that there's just terrible ecological illiteracy there.
Yeah, definitely. And a bit detachment of nature, that we forgot how nature cycles works. For example, that you say the most humane death is not to let it suffer and die, an animal like in nature. It's something that if you live in the city, you don't you're not very conscious about. One thing that very early in our conversation, you said, well, it's actually one of the easiest things to do. What is, in your opinion, the biggest reason we are not doing it already?
There's two reasons for that. One is that it was developed by a small independent scientist from an obscure country in Africa. I've often said if this had been developed at one of the prestigious universities of the world, which it never could have been, if it had been, the whole world would be doing it by now. So academic egos they're one of the most powerful influences in the world, and they've been opposing this. I was banned for over 20 years from even setting foot on any university in southern Africa because of what I was saying. There's such as the fear. So that's been one reason. But even if that hadn't been for that, There's the other, that there's two types of discovery. And it took me a long time to realize that. People discover things that are new, and everybody knows they're new. So citizens know they're new, and institutions know they're new. Now, those get subjected to scientific method, theory, testing, maybe controversy for a decade or whatever. They're accepted, Nobel Prizes are awarded and whatever, and we move forward. Or they're rejected and they're gone. Right? Now, periodically in history, there's been a different type of discovery, where always an individual, never an institution, an individual discovers something that citizens can see is new, but institutions know is not a new discovery. It's wrong. Because when we form human institutions, they take on a life of their own, as I said, and one of what's called with it is that they defend the beliefs of the society in which they were developed.
Yep.
And they will do that for 100, 200 years. So, unfortunately, in what, and I don't say I discovered I was a focal point in it, but I worked with hundreds and hundreds of fellow scientists and pastoralists and farmers, so I don't like to claim that I developed it. I was a focal point in keeping us focused till we solved the problem. Now, in that, when we did solve the problem, and I say we because so many people were involved in all the main government agencies in America and land-run universities as individuals, although sent there by the institutions. When we solved it, it unfortunately involved two discoveries that institutions knew were not, no, those are not new, those are wrong. One was that it is essential, not optional, to learn to use livestock to reverse desertification. So that has been fought tooth and nail by institutions, even in America trying to get me deported because of the damage I was doing to America. The powerful university, etc. So that's one belief. Now the other is the one
It's
we
just
talked
dogmatic.
about earlier.
Just dogmatic. They just say, no, we won't allow that could be the solution.
Well, they know it's wrong. I mean, Copernicus, Galileo, Semmelweis, these people that made new discoveries. Semmelweis died in a mental asylum. He was so persecuted.
Well, you're
I'd
lucky
like
you're sitting in this comfortable place right now, Alan.
Well, thank God I was insane 50 years ago, so that saved me. I was able to keep out of the insane asylum. So, but anyway, the second of the points is the whole world and every institution knows that there are hundreds of ways you can develop policy, dictatorially, scientifically, democratically, blah, 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 blah. No, we discovered that whether you're a dictatorship or democracy, whether you're an environmental organization, a farmers' organization, a university, government, policy is developed exactly the same way. Now, institutions knew that was wrong, so they didn't see it as a new discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those things, that type of discovery, is always, there's history, look at research, look at history, always that has been institutionally fought tooth and nail until public opinion shifts.
And then maybe to little by little end this podcast. Unfortunately, I would love to stay for hours and talk to you, Alan. But how could we then turn this around? What's your main strategy of listeners? What I can do, what you can do in the last 20 years of your life, or 30 years, I don't know how old you're going to become. And the other listeners, what are like the biggest things they can do that will make the largest possible impact, according to you?
Well, I did actually mention it earlier, but it bears repeating. It's the one thing you are doing, and I thank you for that. You're helping to spread the word. As I've just told you, it involves two ideas regarded as heresy by institutions. So what you're doing is the only way known to change, and we can expect governments to develop policy addressing the cause about 100 to 200 years from now.
Yeah.
And the only other thing that I can suggest is what I suggested, and that is that one state, one government, somewhere the leader just acts as a statesman and says, I'm going to try something new. And for that to happen, all your listeners need to do, you just need to get one young person who wants a future, who's determined, to just get a petition signed by 1 million young people to Prime Minister, President of any country, saying, please do this. Just do this on the side. It's low risk.
Let's do this. What are we waiting for?
Yeah.
And for the farmers listening, what are their first steps they can take?
They can only do the best they can. It's all going to be lost cause unless we change at scale.
Yeah.
I've got a pencil in my hand. I don't know how to make one. Nobody does today. It's made by a corporation. Most people can't make a toothpaste. We have got to do it at scale. And that means government policies that make laws, regulations, and dictate practices.
But is there nothing a farmer can do?
Yes, the farmers can do it, and they do. They're joining, many of them are, and it's wonderful, the regenerative agricultural movement.
Yeah.
But that whole movement is not talking about the cause of the problem. And farmers can go and block the streets with their tractors and protest against bad policies. But not one of them says, let's address the cause of the problem, which is the way policies are developed. Because if you change political parties, it doesn't help. The new party develops policy exactly the same way. Yeah. They just change the political flavor.
Yeah.
You have to change the way policy is developed, and the first global leader to do that will probably be in power for the rest of his life. People are wanting good governance.
Yeah.
And they're not getting it, and it's not deliberate. It's because of the way policies are developed. Now, I couldn't say this to you if I hadn't had to live through it. I've been the president of a political party. I've had to develop policies in defense, in education, immigration, agriculture, all these things in my own country. That's when I learned. God, I see how policies developed. I don't know how to do this. Neither does any political leader. Our world leaders don't know what to do. Help them.
It seems like a very daunting task, but we can already start.
It's an easy task. It's an easy task. Just get 1 million signatures signed to ask one leader of a country to be a statesman, and just do this on the side, and let's see what happens, and have it internationally observed.
All right. Well, thanks for your very powerful words, Allan. Very, very big pleasure to finally meet you. Heard so much about you already. Followed your courses, and grateful for the regeneration you did with mimicking nature with livestock, and also by defining and looking at the bigger context, really digging deeper. And I think it's a very big part of the solution we as humans need to do. And thank you very much, listeners, to listen to the second episode of Green the Desert podcast. And if you like this, you can always subscribe to it, give a comment, review it, and most of all, spread it, just like Allan said. Spread it with other people that really need to listen to this and take action, because it's better. The future depends on you. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.